Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Tat Sat. So we had done a brief introduction to the whole school of Kashmiri Saivism, and there are different divisions amongst them. And without getting into much details, we'll now start having a short discussion on the Siva Sutras. The number of sutras are aphorisms which are within it, and then we'll get into each sutra and meditate on it. This particular text has three divisions, and we'll also have a discussion on these three sections or chapters. And what are the techniques, as I have mentioned you yesterday, as we have discussed, that Siva Sutra is largely sadhana pradhana. So it's kind of focused on the tools and techniques of spiritual practice and prayasa and perseverance and effort, the act of striving towards that Atma Tattva which will liberate us. And how to get that liberation, briefly, we have discussed that yesterday. There is one approach where you essentially remember your divine nature, which is very similar to the Vedantic practices. Praptasya Prapti, what we call in Vedanta, they say more or less the same thing in a few different sets of words. It's called Prativingya, remembering. So your Swarupa, you remember it. That is one school. And there is one school is called Spanda. Now we need to focus on the Spanda aspect uh, a little today, because this particular text, Siva Sutra, has a clear and close relationship and correspondence with what is called Spanda Karika. What is Spandana and what is Spanda? So we'll look at it. But before that, a little discussion on the book itself. Now, Siva Sutra and Spanda Sutra, as I mentioned right now, are very closely interrelated. Siva Sutra, there are a lot of theories as to who actually wrote these texts. It's Lord Shiva himself sort of revealed it to Vasugupta. Some people say that he got it via one very well endowed Siddha Guru, and some people say that he sort of received the direction in his dream. And there is a famous Mahadeva Parvata in Kashmir where he went and he could also locate the Shiva rock, and then he sort of he sort of meditated on it. There are some people, great Sanskrit scholars like Bhandarkar, who sort of would like to argue that essentially it is Spandakarika which have been converted and succinctly put into a set of aphorisms called Shiva Sutra. Okay, so first thing, it's kind of compared with, you can look at this whole thing by denying any human authorship. The tradition holds Shiva Sutra as what is known as or referred to by many sadhakas and scholars of this particular school as Shiva Upanishad. This is as good as Upanishad. It was revealed by none other than Lord Shiva himself. So the human author who gave it a set of words, who captured it in words, Vasugupta, is essentially somebody who is translating the insights and ideas which was given by Lord Shiva. Why did Lord Shiva give it? Because he was a little disturbed by his devotees and sadhakas who were getting trapped into dualism. That he'll go to a Shiva temple, do some puja, get some benefits. The secret behind this Shiva Upasana was kind of getting lost, to put it in very naive layman's language. So there is a beautiful, line which is kind of mentioned by Bhaskara, Shivaha Sutram Ari Rachat Sutra Maha Maheshwaraha. So, it's kind of sort of the person who is a follower of Lord Shiva, who is a Maheshwara. It's a Tadita of Maheshwara Shishya, something you can say Maheshwaraha, somebody who follows that tradition. He codifies this as Shiva Sutra, but who mentioned the sutras? Lord Shiva himself. And there was this famous book by Bhatta Kalatta as a Spanda Sarvashwa. Okay, these are So there are different uh, major commentators on Shiva Sutras. Amongst them, there are most prominent two commentators. One is Khyamaraja, the other one is Bhatta Bhaskara. Okay, so Pradhan. He's the sorry, he's called Khyamaraja Bhatta Bhaskara, and then there are two ways. So Bhatta Bhaskara and Khyamaraja, there are two ways in which they have interpreted it. Even though both of them are followers of the tradition, there are finer distinctions in which they have written it. The book written by Bhatta Bhaskara to elaborate on it is called Shiva Sutra. It's called the Shiva Sutra Bhartikakara. And the other guy, Khyamaraja, wrote Shiva Sutra Bimarshini, meditation on it. Now, if you look at the timeline of these people, some people sort of ascribe a timeline to them that Bhatta Bhaskara perhaps would somewhere be around Kalata Bhatta, a part of that. These are sort of taken out from the Rajatarangini, which recorded the royal lineage, Bhatta Kallata. Kalata Bhatta is kind of located at around 855 CE, Common Era, which means that Bhaskara would be somewhere about, because after four generations would be, compared to their times, it would be roughly about 955 Common Era. Okay, so it's roughly about before 1000 AD. You can say that. Now, so Vasugupta had this major Shishya called Bhatta Kallatta, and Bhaskara was somebody who is following his path, and so there is this mention. Khyamaraja would say that it was kind of noted on some rock. Lord Shiva gives him a direction to go and recover, which is kind of written, is kind of inscription on a big piece of stone, and he sort of Vasugupta kind of retrieves it and sort of codifies them and writes them down. And whereas Bhatta Kallata will write that Vasugupta actually got all the sutras in his own dream, and then the other people would say that who got it through a guru. Now, the most famous Siva Sutras have a close correspondence with a famous book, because after reading Siva Sutra, you may be interested in more Kashmiri Saivism books. That will be Spandakarika, very closely interrelated. And the Spandakarika is also written by Vasugupta himself. And that is what is written by Khyamaraja. He attributes, and then some people attribute Spandakarika to Kallat also. So there is a lot of discussion on that. Some people say that Spandakarika is not his original writing. So there's a bit of debate on it, and we don't need to get into it. Some people say that Bhatta Kallata actually sort of took away the explanations and the insights from Vasugupta Spanda Sastra and sort of composed the Spandakarika. But most critical thing is, what is the Spanda Tattva? What is the name of this thing? Vibration. So the Atma is Niskriya, Nishchala, and all that. We have studied in the Upanishads. So what they are trying to say is that Spandana is like something which moves, something which vibrates. The Supreme Self is without any vibrations, is without any movement, without any vikara, without any modification. We have studied that in Advaita Vedanta, and this text is also kind of referred to as a Shiva Upanishad, more or less the same thing, except that they're saying that that Paramatma, which is Nistaranga, that means without any vibration, which is only one, when it expands and manifests itself as Sarvarupa, that means with names and forms, and then he has the capacity to manifest itself, because we have discussed that yesterday. There are two ways to look at it. From our perspective, this is called Abhasavada. It's just an appearance. Oh, sorry, Ajatavada. Nothing is actually created. This is what we think. From the perspective of the Lord, from the perspective of that, how do you look at it? It's Swatantriyavada. That Maya Sakti of the Lord makes him supremely autonomous, is not subjected to any constraints or limitations, and therefore he can create this whole samsara without having to rely on any conceptual tool like we have in Vedanta called Maya or anything. That's all in him. Okay. And so this Spanda Swarupa, you can say that it is essentially a flourishing of the Maya Sakti of the Lord in himself. That is the most critical aspect of it. You have to keep it in mind. You can see your face in a mirror which is external to you. I see my face in a mirror. There is a mirror and there's a person who is visible in the mirror. The image is not real, fine, but there is a mirror outside of me. So in Vedanta, there's a bit of push and pull on that issue as to Maya Pratibimbita Chaitanya, Avidya Pratibimbita Chaitanya. They have these concepts. Now, where is this Maya? You are saying Maya is not different from Brahman, and yet it's reflected on that. The Kashmiri Saivism is very straightforward. What it says is that I'm not saying is reflected on Maya. I'm not trying to drive home this idea that the Supreme Self is absolutely without any attributes because it has the capacity to assume any attributes that it so likes. So Lord Shiva is kind of seeing his own image in himself. It's pure consciousness seeing its own reflection in itself. Swabhittau. The platform is he himself and is reflected in him. It's all comprehensive, all encompassing, very integral. There's nothing outside of it. This is also Advaita, but the duality is kind of integrated into that non-duality. God of his own will sees his own image in his own consciousness, and that consciousness, that's Swatantra Sakti, that Maya Sakti with which this happens. So what is Spanda? When it is outwardly oriented, and the reflection falls in its own consciousness, we call it spanda. Though there is no vibration, it can appear as if it's having vibration. Sacha eka api yugapad eva unmesha nimeshamayi. Unmesha and nimesha. It's like you open your eyes and you close your eyes. It's like you manifest and you destroy and annihilate everything and you get back to it. So the divinity descends as reality, as samsara, and ascends and becomes itself. It drops all names and forms. Why should it do it? It's for the fun of it. You cannot ask questions to the Supreme Self as to why it's doing it. There is no rationale as such. Don't waste your time. Bhagavan has said that in Bhagavad Gita, Mama Maya Durateya. Don't you waste your time trying to understand. By the way, the Kashmiri Saivism accepts Gita as a critical text, and Abhinava Gupta has a commentary on it from the point of view of the Kashmiri Saivism. So among the 7 major Advaita commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, they also have a commentary. They have no, conflict with it. And whenever they are trying to explain anything, they say that each and every word of Bhagavad Gita sort of abides by their central principles. There's absolutely no conflict, and they are not contradicting Lord Krishna's words given in Bhagavad Gita. So they are, everybody has sort of tried to understand the Bhagavad Gita from their perspective to give a good rationale and justification to their own spiritual way of reaching the Supreme Self. That's what they have also done it. There's no problem in it. So, whatever has been created, Praksishta Veda Sanghara Rupachas Ya Nimesha Dasa Sa Eva Chid Veda Prathaya Unmesha Bhuhu. Whatever was existing prior to that moment of destruction or annihilation, that becomes Unmesha and Nimesha, which didn't exist, manifests again. That is what we call Unmesha. He annihilates, withdraws, that is called Nimesha. So that particular Shakti can create Unmesha and Nimesha, appearance and disappearance. At the same time, Jugapat, there's absolutely no conflict. It's not one after the other. It's fascinating, isn't it? The world is created, the world is annihilated at the same time and absolutely without any conflict. And that's the magical power of the Supreme Lord. So, Mahaprakasa Atma Parameshwara. So, that Paramarsha Sakti that he has, that meditation, okay? So, there is an appearance of Kinchit Chalatta, as if something is moving, and that is the moment of creation, that is the moment of manifestation. So it's aditya, advaita, it's ekorupatmaka, there is no duality, nothing, and yet there are two aspects of unmesha and nimesha. So there is this interesting word to explain why that is happening. Parameshwaraha punnatvat, he is one and complete and all comprehensive. Swataha ananda ghunitehi तेर भूत भेदात्मभिः प्रकाशेर एवं एतत् सदृशम क्रीडति हर्षानुसारी स्पंदः क्रीडा. According to his sweet according to his own sweet desire or will or whatever you ascribe to him, he moves. You remember in that Ishopanishad, there is a beautiful sentence that Atma is Ajat Anajat. It moves not. It absolutely doesn't move, Anajat. And yet it can move faster than the mind. Wherever you go, it's already there. Why? Because it's all comprehensive, it's everywhere there. That is the Vedantic interpretation of it. But what he's saying here is Parameshwaraha, for the fun of his own manifestation, can take any form, and that spanda, that creation. Why do we need to understand what is spanda? Unless we grasp the secret aspect of it, will not make sense of why we are here. We will not make sense of what is the supreme consciousness. We will not find a way to that supreme consciousness, because what sort of appears in middle is that spanda thing, that dual nature of the supreme, that it manifests and it doesn't. That's pure, and yet it's manifest, it's multiple, it's diverse. That particular magical aspect of it, until we grasp, we will stay confused whether God is in names and forms, or God is without names and forms. That conflict will remain, and that is sort of solved by this conceptual tool called kampana or spanda. So there's this beautiful sentence, Unmesha Nimeshamai Parameshwari Ichha Sakti, and that itself is Spanda. So, whatever is referred to, God has these five kinds of Saktis, right? So, you have this Chiti Sakti, Sarva Vyapaka. Then you have what? Next comes Ananda Sakti. Then you have Ichha Sakti, Jnana Sakti, and Kriya Sakti. These are the five Saktis that we discussed. And how, because of Swatyantriya, once it's kind of tinged with Maya, how suddenly everything gets inverted. Jnana, which is Sarvajnatva, becomes Kala, sorry, Vidya. What we have discussed yesterday. I'll not like to repeat them again, but just remember this much, that Unmesha Nimesha Mai Parameshwari Ichha Sakti, that itself is Spanda. There is no physical vibration. It's the magic of the supreme divine will. It's very, very interesting. That is what he's saying. And then he sort of beautifully mentions there's this famous book called Malini Vijuttara Tantra, in which there's another way in which this is mentioned. Sa ekapi sati anekatvam yatha gachati tatsrunu. It's one, and how it can be many, I'll explain to you. You know, the best example that they give is very similar to what we have heard or read in Advaita Vedanta. You have this reflecting stone or a gemstone which can assume multiple colors like a diamond. So you have 20 people around it wearing 20 colors and this and that, and they are all kind of getting reflected, and it has multiple colors. It has no color of its own. It can assume any colors depending on who sort of comes close. You know, Advaita Vedanta, the word that is used to explain this is called adhyasa or superimposition. These people don't get into this theoretical, you know, very difficult exercises of trying to explain with theory of adhyasa and all that. They are saying artho upadhi vasad yati chintamani iva Ishwari. Like that gemstone can assume any color, God's supreme will, depending on our Papa Punyas, can give us results without actually undergoing any change. So they bypass this whole theoretical challenge of trying to give a theory of superimposition and blah blah blah. They directly says, don't ask any questions. The Supreme can do anything that it wants, and they are explaining it using that Pralaya and Udaya both are happening because that's Spanda Sakti of the Lord, the Supreme Lord. Lord Shiva here is not Lord Shiva, who is the husband of Ma Parvati, Supreme Consciousness. That non dual consciousness, that is what is mentioned here. And in the Spanda Karika, you have there are four major commentators. One is Bhatta Kalatta, there is Ramakantacharya, Utpala Vaishnava, Acharya Kshemaraja. But the details, because we are right now not getting into an academic discussion in it, so therefore we are not wasting our time. It's not about wastage, but we are not getting into it. So once we know this, then it becomes very easy. You remember that when you are doing japa, you have this para, pashyanti, and madhyama, and vaikhari. So you're speaking aloud. Then there's so all these are coming not only in yoga but also in Vedanta and everywhere. Similarly, there is the Sakti chakra, Bhagavan Spanda, Spanda Sakti. It has similarly Khechari, Gochari, Dikchari, Bhuchari. Khechari has to do with Paravak. Para Pashyanti. So there is no sound in para. So Paravak is beyond which is captured in words or sounds in vibrations. Then Gochari is Pashyanti back when you're kind of muttering it within. Again, in a mental thing. And then you have Dikchari and a Madhyama and a Vaikhari. And I'm sort of not getting too much into it, and we are moving further. The most critical thing that we have to understand in Kashmiri Saivism is that Sakti and Saktiman, the same way as in Vedanta, are also considered to have what is called equivalence or samarasya, whatever you call that. There's a beautiful verse in Saundarya Lahari where they say, Siva Saktya Yukto Yadi Bhavati Saktaha Prabhavitum Nachedevam Devana Khalu Kushalaha Spanditum Api. If the power of energy, that Shakti, if God has it, then He can create everything. But He's bereft of that Shakti, that magical power, the Spanda Shakti. He can't even move an inch. That is how Lord Shankaracharya is propitiating, Saundarya Lahari, the Divine Mother. Without you, Lord Shiva can't even move an inch. What to talk about creation and destruction, Srishti and Sanghara and Siti and all that. Now, some people who are academically, doing a lot of research on it, they have tried to establish some bit of equivalence between Shiva Sutras and the Spanda Karika, and they are saying this sutra has clear equivalence with this one and that. Just I'm mentioning it. So all sets of these Spanda Karikas also kind of, sort of closely related to this whole thing, the Shiva Sutras. Then the Prativigya, I would just like to mention a little. How does the Prativigya happen? How do you remember your Swarupa? This question will definitely come into your mind. How does that happen? There are again two ways to it, which they mention. It's like Purva Sanskara, like I am Lord Shiva, Aham Brahmasmi, and you are reminded of it through removing layers and layers of ignorance in Vedanta. Similarly, they are saying that this sanskara, which is always in there in you, because you are Dibya, you are divine, you are pure, you remember it. The other one is you experience it. So you have that Purva Sanskara, but what is Prativigya? Ask yourself, what is remembering and Prativigya? What is the difference? Remembering and recognizing. In Vedanta, we have this word called Soyam Devadattaha. So there is Tatta Vishishta Devadatta, who was a little boy, who was your classmate. And then you are meeting that Devadatta right now, who is a grown up with a wife and two children. He has hair in his beard. He's got a good job. He's got a good car. Those days, he was your classmate. You used to fight with him. And both of you were in half pants maybe during your school days. That Tatta Vishishta Devadatta, who was less than 10 years of age, is right now standing in front of you in his 40s or late 30s or whatever, with two children and a wife. Obviously, there are very clear distinctions, or what you see and what he was, there's a clear conflict. Then you try to remove this Birudhangsha, the childhood of Devadatta, the babyhood. He didn't have any beard or mustache. He didn't have a job. He was barely 3.5, 4 feet. Right now, he's a tall guy, 6 feet. He has a wife, he has two children, all these. Remove what is common. So, I am Datta, Sa, and I am that Devadatta and this Devadatta. You are referring to both in one physical body. This guy is called that Devadatta. So, here, if you can look at it, there is memory in the Visheshanangsha. You are remembering. And then in the Visheshangsha, or what is the noun that you see right in front of you, the object has a few. That boy who was with me in school has become this man, but you are seeing him. So there is Anubhava. That object of your perception, the object of recognition is always in front of you. And it has something to do with the object of perception which you had experienced long back. That is the difference between memory and recognition. When you are recognizing anything, it is right in front of you. And you're experiencing it in the light of your past experience. So in Prativigya, remembering your divinity, remembering your Swarupa, there are two aspects. One is you are remembering. So it's quite possible that a person who was a very rich man has become poor. He is remembering his riches. And then a person who was poor, who had gone bankrupt, has recovered his wealth, and then he's experiencing his prosperity again, and he is saying, I am as rich as I was 20 years back before my business failure and bankruptcy and all that. So there are two aspects. One is the experience of your divinity. That means you are having that sakshatkara. And the other one is that you are remembering. That means you had experienced it earlier, you are experiencing it again. So these are the two ways. So now what happens is that we have already discussed a lot about because you must be really curious how long is going to be the introduction. How long can we do that? Now we are going to actually the book. And I would just like to say that the Siva Sutra is broadly kind of split into three sections that we are going to do from Thursday onwards. And the first one is called Sambhava Samavesha. There are three upayas. So there are different ways to connect with the Lord of the universe. He had Chit Sakti, Ananda Sakti, Ichha Sakti, Jnana Sakti, and Kriya Sakti. And you're going to reach him through understanding, connecting with his Saktis. So obviously, there would be 5 ways to reach him. But the first one, which is called Chit Shakti, because it's pure, obviously there's no way to be there. When we have exhausted these paths, the 4 ways to go to him, because the fifth one is not mediated, there is no medium through which by doing sadhana you can reach there. So just remember one word, it's called anupaya. There is no upaya there. Once you have reached, you have done the course, nothing, you don't have to do anything to write your before your name PhD or doctor or anything. You've done your business. Other than that, you have 4. These are mediums, and you have to do sadhanas. So, other these 4, again, there is something called what is Ananda Upaya. Both are Abhedatmaka. And then there you have these 3 other ones. So, you have Ichha, Jnana, and Kriya. So, Ichha Sakti, you have to do Ichha Upaya. That is the first section of this book. Second one is Jnanopaya. The third one is the Kriya Upaya. The Ichha Upaya, that by sweet will you can enter into that higher state of being. obviously you are a very fine sadhaka. If you can solve any mathematical puzzle or quiz by just wishing, you are a very smart student. The moment you apply your mind, you can solve it. The other one does a bit of reflection and meditation. He's holding the middle ground. So that is the Jnanopaya in Shiva Sutras. The third category is the Kriya Upaya. He does a bit of struggle and he solves it. So, the Siva Sutra, the first section, is for the excellent students who will do the Ichhaupaya, or it's called Sambhavo Paya. Second category is Jnanopaya. Third category is Kriyaupaya. Now, before we go, what is this Sambhavopaya? Then he's saying Sakhyad Upaya Neti Sambhavena. So, just wish and you're there. It's fantastic. Some people interpret in this way that you have Guru's grace or a powerful Siddha's ways. He wishes or God wishes and you reach there. That would be a very simple interpretation of it, and there is a lot of mystery involved in this whole Sambhavapaya that we're going to study. First thing you have to remember that above this, of course, you have the Anupaya. So, it's very interesting. To go to that Anupaya, you have to do Sambhavapaya. To reach Sambhavapaya, to do a PhD, to do postdoctoral, you must have done your PhD. And after your postdoctoral, you're just writing, you have done your postdoctoral. You don't have to do any other research. To do your PhD, to do your postdoctoral, you have to do your PhD. Doctoral thesis you have to do. And to do your doctoral thesis, you have to do coursework, masters. And to do your masters, you must have done your undergraduate courses. And before that, you have to do your high school, or in India, it was called intermediate earlier, or plus two, or high school. So there this. So by perfecting your Kriya Upaya, you go into the Jnana Upaya. By perfecting the Jnana Upaya, you go to that Sambhava Upaya, which is Abhedatmaka. It's not contemplative any duality. It is a perfect state. By sheer wish, you are establishing yourself there. And what is if I have to describe it in words, what will be the meditation of that guy like? It's captured here. Matta evauditam idam mayyeva pratibimbitam madavinnam idam cheti tridhupayah sa sambhavaha. You know what? Aham brahmasmi in Vedanta. It's vichara. Shravana Manana Nididhyasana, the ultimate thing is that vichara. Same thing is kind of saying, Matta eva uditam idam. Everything has arisen out of me. Everything has risen out of me. So there's a beautiful sentence in Saiva Siddhanta. Who is the one who actually meets Lord Shiva? The one who meditates on Lord Shiva as non different from him. You're going to Lord Shiva, okay, give me success, protect my children, all that. That's a preliminary level of research on the divine, preliminary level of communicating with the divine. But the highest level is when you don't distinguish yourself from the Supreme Self, Lord Shiva. Matta eva uditam idam. Everything that is visible in front of me has arisen out of me. Mayeva pratibimbitam. And all that is reflected that I see, is it outside of me? No. They are all reflected in me because he's kind of like Lord Shiva. Mata vinnam idam cheti. And it's not different from me. I'm looking at the sansara. What is that Bhagavan says? Who is a jnani in Bhagavad Gita, if you remember? Samahatma Sudallavaha Sarvam Vasudevam iti. The one who is being able to meditate that everything is Lord Krishna and I'm not different from Lord Krishna. Samahatma Sudallava, Bhagavan says, I have Artha, Jigyasu, Artharthi. Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasu, and Jnani. Jnani is not different from me. He's one and the same as me. That is what we are talking about in the Sambhavapaya. Tridhopayaha sa Sambhavaha. So this whole world has come out of you, reflected in you, and it's not different from you. That is what Vishwam, Vishwa ahantatmaka. Everything is me. I mean, you see, aham brahmasmi is the Vedanti's language. And here, because Lord Shiva has manifest, he's Jagatmaya. He's Jaganmaya, he's Suddha, he's Buddha, and he has attributes, he doesn't have any attributes. He can manifest with his sweet will. This whole Jagat is divine, and you are saying, I am everything. I'm not different. So you're not craving for anything because you are in that supreme state. That's what he's mentioning. So you are Vishwamaya. Swatmani eva chidakase Vishwam asmi abhavhasayan Srasta Vishwatmaka iti prathaya bhairavat mata. So when you become that perfect Bhairava, that Sambhavopaya, how do you reach there? He's saying when you have that Swa Atmani Eva Chidakase, in that Chit Rupaka Akasa, in the sky of consciousness, Vishwam Asmi Abhasayan, I am reflecting this world in my own consciousness. Srasta Vishwatmaka iti, and I am the creator of this whole thing, and I am the creation. You are the creator, you are the creation, you are the bhokta, you are the bhogya. Everything is you. Iti prathaya bhairavat mata. That's how you perfect that Shivahood in you. Okay? It's beautiful, it's wonderful. Actually, it's the supreme level. Sa eva bhairavo deva jagat bharana lakshana swatma darshe samagram hi yat saktya pratibimbitam swa atma darshe. Atma Adars. Adars is a mirror, and he's seeing this whole universe in the mirror of the self. And he's that Bhairava. Jagadvarana Lakshana. And he sort of is all pervading, he's encompassing everything, he's touching everything, not physically, because physically we cannot do it. That means that we have, after transcending the body consciousness, the consciousness of our Vijnanamaya Kosha, this Manomaya Kosha, etc., when you go to that supreme level of undivided unity with the Supreme Lord Shiva, you kind of experience it. And then you have sort of the Sakta Upaya. So, briefly, I'll talk about the Sakta Upaya and the other two, the Anaba Upaya a little, and then we will sort of stop here and then we'll start the mantras from the next class. So, what is that Sakta Upaya? You all know that Anavopaya, the Sambhavopaya, is very philosophical, and this is kind of reflective, but it's not dualistic reflection, it's non dualistic reflection at the deepest state of your consciousness, where you are not looking at God as distinct and above or below or outside of you. Neither are you seeing this whole universe, which is not different from the Supreme Self. It's outside of you, or you are part of it, or this is part of me. No, not nothing of that. You are seeing everything as in within you. You can understand how supreme, how subtle, how powerful is that state. And how to reach there, we will do the sutras. How to do that, we'll do the sutras. Now, the Sakta Upayagata Sadhana, how do you do it? Sakta Upaya, it's kind of meditative. There is Bheda and Abheda both. It's dualistic non-dualism kind of thing. And what he's saying, what you're kind of meditate on it, and therefore mantra satyatmaka. So you'll make use of mantras to meditate. So different bija mantras are there. Therefore, there's a whole discussion on the varna matrakas from or to ksha. What are the mystic significance of each and every alphabet in Sanskrit, and how the bija mantras are created, how to meditate on them. So you look at the mantras, in the mantras you have the varnas, and there are powers associated with them. So you are using these tools and techniques. Therefore, there's this first, the first sutra of the second chapter is Chittam Mantraha. First chapter, first sutra is Chaitanyam Atma, Jnanam Bandhaha. Knowledge is a bondage. Consciousness is the self. Because to have thoughts We'll discuss that in our next class. Obviously, there is some kind of dualism, and therefore, that is the mother of bondage. That is the mother of all insufficiency and incompleteness. And similarly, here, the first thing is chittam mantra. You have to have that consciousness to be able to meditate on it. And a mantra is not seen as an external tool. And again, this whole meditative. Chetyate bimrishyate anena param tattvam iti chittam. You're being able to make yourself aware, you're conscious of it, you're bimrishyate, you're meditating on it, reflecting on it. By this, what are you meditating? Param tattvam, the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth. Therefore, it's called chittam. And he's saying that this is what is mantra. And then, obviously, you'll have to look at dharmatmata and trana dharmata, all that, the secrets of the mantras and all are is discussed in this whole chapter. And then, when you move forward, I mean, I don't want to get into it because what is the Kavarga, who is the Adhistatri Devi? It's Panchabhutatmaka, and then Chavarga is Gandha, Rupa, Rasa, Sparsha, all that, Tanmatras. And Tavarga, Adhistatri is Komari. And then what is it? Panchakarmendriyas, Ta, Ta, Da, Dhana. Tavarga, Ta, Tha, Da, Dhana. These are the Pancha Jnanendriyas represented by these Varnas. Pavarga, Pa, Ha, Ba, Bha, Ma. This is the Devi Charshika, and the Manabuddhi Ahankara Prakriti Purusha. These five are represented by the Pavarga. And Sha, Sa, Ishvara, Sadasiva, Sakti Tattva. These are represented by it. Ha is Visharga. So you have, and then O and A, everything. A is Shiva, Ha is Sakti, Visharga Sakti, Akara Chit Sakti, Akara Ananda, Hakara Ichha Sakti, Ikara Harshva E, and Dirgha Ikara Vishwa. So all this Ukara Jnana Sakti, Vishwa Unmesha. So Anuttara Shiva, that is Ha is Visharga Sakti. So all these secrets, one can spend a lifetime meditating on these alphabets and these vijas and the mantras because it's a very complex. There's a lot of mystery behind everything that you are touching. It's not that these are just letters in the secular tools to speak and this and that. For us, whatever we are doing, whatever we are thinking, has some correspondence, some purpose. There's a motive as to what we are doing. Once we know the secret by using language, we would know how to use the language to reunite with the Supreme Self. Without knowing, you're using language, but in order to make us more efficient as living animals in the form of human beings. Manushya rupe mrigaha charanti. So these are the secrets which I mentioned. And and there is on and on, so I'm not getting into all that. Then you have the Arnav Upayatmaka Sadhana, which is for the preliminary sadhakas, and that is what is mentioned. How do you do it? Because that is, so he would say Atma, Chittam. So there is also the whole prakarana as to how they meditate on each of the. So you look at you know, what we actually generally call sadhana will come under this category. So you'll have Vyapara, you will do Adhyavasaya, Buddhi, Ahankara. You'll try to sort of clean up the whole system. You'll do Bhuta Suddhi, you'll do Pranayama, Dharana, Pratyahara, Samadhi, all that. And you'll try to sort of, make use of all that to sort of unite with the Supreme. And then there are different perfections that you achieve called siddhis. Like Nadi Sanghara, there is something called Bhuta Jaya, Bhuta Kaivalya, Bhuta Protectva. All these are like you have Anima, Lagima. All these are mentioned in the Yoga Sutra. Similarly, here, there are a lot of sadhanas and a lot of siddhis in the fourth category of the whole, So, now having done all that, we are sort of meditating a little on the final thing, that how to sort of look into this, that you will do this, that whole Sambhava thing. The most critical thing, that realizing that Ichha Sakti Shorupa when you have overcome the limitations of your intellect, when you have overcome the limitations associated with the body mind complex, what is the difference between a capable guy and a less capable guy? What is the difference between expert consultant you hire for a job and a new entrant or a professional who is in your company? Look at that to understand these three ways of connecting with the divine. The expert consultant who has done it all, he has all the skills, he has all the knowledge. He comes to your office, he charges you a hell of a lot of money, and he's saying, what do you want? What's your problem? Then you say that, look, I have this, I have to do my financial restructuring. I'm making a few losses. And he says, okay, I need these documents. So you make all your departments to make presentations. You looks at them, and very quickly, he's not one of those typical consultants who give you a document and take money. If he's a capable consultant, he looks at everything, and very quickly he looks at it and he says, this is what has to be done. Do you want to hire me to do it? Okay, these are the things I'll do with you. Is fully capable. So he just has to sign the contract paper. He gets going. He doesn't need any help. He gets going. He knows how to do. Similarly, the sadhaka who can reach this state with the power of his will, once he gets into it, he's able to do it. I'm just putting it in a very inaccurate and a very layman's language to make sense of it. So that is the Ichha Sakti sadhana. That is what it's saying. So it's not relying on any prop as such. It's not relying on either mantra or physical exercises or pranayama or anything. That fellow has exhausted all those sadhanas. So what is it all about? This is nirvikalpakatmaka sakshatkara. Why it's nirvikalpakatmaka sakshatkara? Otherwise, you have X, Y, Z. I'm going to meditate on X. So there is Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. We had done that when we are doing the sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita. You have Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara. We had done all that whole scale, how to reach at that ultimate thing. So that is what he's kind of. So that is what happens. So what he's mentioned here, that this is, if you look at the Jnanopaya and Kriya Upaya, they are Savikalpakatmaka. That means there is an external thing that you are kind of meditating on it. So in Sambhava Upaya, as I was telling you, that everything has emerged out of it, everything is kind of going to get dissolved in you, and you are meditating on that Supreme Self. There is a state, by the way, which is even superior to the Sambhava Upaya. It's called Ananda Upaya, and beyond that, there is Anupaya. And this particular Ananda Upaya is largely what is called the Anugraha Marga, God's grace. It happens. So it could be either Guru's grace or God's grace. Some of the most renowned, historically notable devotees of the Lord, whether it's Lord, whether it is Meera or it's Tulsidas, or you look at Lord Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahansa, all these people were kind of playing games with the divine force, isn't it? They used to say, you do this, I'll give it to you. Thakur has mentioned he had gone to Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and he was not very well. And then he says that I have told mother to save him. I'll give her some mishri and I'll give her coconut waters. This sort of deal with them. So they're relying on grace and they know how to get it, and they're communicating with the Supreme Self. In order to make it easy for us to understand, the storylines are kind of still in the dualistic mold. But if you look at that sadhaka, there is no duality, because he is aware of that divine presence all the time. So that Ananda Upaya is beyond the Sambhava Upaya. Of course, it will not be very correct to quote the story of perhaps Ramakrishna Paramahansa here, because there you would say that there is Upasya Upasaka Veda. I just mentioned it to say that how willfully they are. And then the state in which the devotee is no more thinking about God or anything. He's in that state of ecstasy, and that is happening because of God's grace, and that is ananda. He's not doing anything. He's not doing any complete, any contemplation or anything. He's in that state of ecstasy. That is the ananda upaya. Everything that we see in their lives, sort of taking them to that highest state of bliss, and beyond that, some people don't come back out of it. When you reach that final level, you can never come out of it. So that is the perfect nirvikalpa samadhi, which is anupaya. There is no upaya. There is no way to reach there. Sometimes there is no return. So that is the most, you know, uh, ultimate sort of ultimate level to reach there. So there are a lot of discussions, uh, but we would not get into the details here, about each and every, because that will be a little academic, like we had done it when we were doing the Bhagavad Gita sixth chapter, and a long discussion on different levels of samadhi is sort of was done by Madhusudana Saraswati. That's purely academic. It's good for knowing, but you are actually not there. It's like, how does a billionaire manage his portfolio? You're discussing when you are talking about maybe only $50,000 or $100,000, even less, or if you don't have a job. It's completely an irrelevant story. So these things are there in the text. You can read for yourself, but these are not of much relevance. Even Shiva Sutra, as you, they are first taking up the highest state of sadhana. I mean, the third highest level of sadhana, just below the Anandopaya and below the Anupaya, which is the supreme, then Anandopaya, then you have the Sambhavapaya. And then they will take us down. This is a particular technique. Somebody might say that when I'm not capable of it, why are you talking about such a higher level? Like Bhagwan Krishna also will always advise Arjuna that you have to do this. If you cannot do it, the mother asks the child, for example, to do a hell of a lot of homework, and he says, I'm not going to do it. Okay, so he settled down for one or two chapters that he has to do. It's similar, depending on, so they first, like for example, in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, first you have the Samadhi Pada. And, after that, finally, so sort of they talk about Sadhana Pada. First they talk about the ultimate level. Similarly, here also the same thing. They are dealing with the highest level, then you have the middle level, then you have the lower level, and we'll get into it. And the first sutra is Chaitanyam Atma and what it means, and beautiful, very enlightening. I'll get into it in the next class, the sutras. We have 2 minutes. Any questions? I'm happy to discuss. Any questions? Any of you have it? Otherwise, we can do the Santi Mantras. No questions? Okay, we can do the Santi Mantras. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamiva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Tat Sat.